July 2nd, 1937, 8:43 in the morning, the middle of the Pacific Ocean. Aboard a Coast Guard cutter, a radio operator hears a woman's voice. Loud, signal strength 5, the maximum. She sounds close enough to touch. She says, "We are on the line 157-337, running on line north and south." Then, nothing. Nothing, ever again. Or so the official story goes. 89 years later, people are still finding her plane. The problem? It keeps turning out to be something else. And in 26 days, a ship sails to check one last shape in a lagoon. By 1937, Amelia Earhart wasn't just a pilot. She was the most famous woman in the world. In 1932, she'd flown the Atlantic alone, the first woman ever to do it, landing in an Irish farm field and asking a startled farmhand where she was. Her final challenge? Fly around the entire world at the equator, roughly 29,000 miles. Her aircraft, a twin-engine Lockheed Electra, funded by Purdue University and nicknamed the Flying Laboratory. Beside her, Fred Noonan, one of the best aerial navigators alive, a man who had charted Pan Am's routes across this exact ocean. If anyone could find a speck of land in the Pacific, it was him. By late June 1937, they had flown about 22,000 miles. Only 7,000 remained, all of it over the Pacific, and the very next leg was the one every pilot feared. Lae, New Guinea to Howland Island, 2,556 miles of open water. Howland is a coral speck, 2 miles long, half a mile wide, 20 feet high. Missing it by even a few dozen miles means seeing nothing but ocean. At 10 a.m. local time on July 2nd, the Electra lifted off from Lae carrying roughly 1,100 gallons of fuel, enough for about 20 hours in the air. The flight was planned at 18. The margin was thin, and something may have already gone wrong on that runway. Some researchers who studied film of that takeoff believe a radio antenna on the plane's belly was torn away as it bounced down the runway. It's disputed, but it would explain the single strangest fact of this entire case. She could transmit, but she never seemed to hear anyone. Waiting at Howland, the Coast Guard cutter Itasca, its boilers making thick black smoke as a beacon visible for miles. Its radio room was ready on her frequencies, 3,105 and 6,210 kilocycles. Through the night, her voice arrived in fragments. Weather reports, position calls, mostly swallowed by static. Then, as the sun came up on July 2nd, the fragments turned into a countdown. Around 6:15 a.m., she reported herself roughly 200 miles out. Half an hour later, about 100. Each call was getting louder. In the Itasca's radio room, Chief Radioman Leo Bellarts and his men could hear her getting closer with every transmission. 7:42 a.m. Her voice bursts in, stronger than ever. "We must be on you but cannot see you, but gas is running low." She reports flying at just 1,000 feet, scanning the waves for the island. The men on the Itasca ran to the deck rails, certain the plane was about to appear overhead. It never did. Here's the cruel mechanics of it. The Itasca was answering her, repeatedly, but evidence suggests she never heard a single voice reply the entire flight. Whatever happened to that antenna, the conversation only ever flowed one way. At 7:58 she radioed, "We are circling but cannot hear you." She asked the ship to send signals on 7,500 kilocycles, and for the only time that morning, something got through. She heard their Morse code beeps, but her direction-finding loop couldn't take a bearing on a frequency that high. She could hear the lighthouse. She just couldn't tell where it was. 8:43 a.m. The final confirmed transmission, logged at signal strength 5. "We are on the line 157-337. We are running on line north and south." A navigation line drawn through the sun's position. Somewhere on that line was Howland. Somewhere on that line was her. And then the ocean went quiet. The Itasca called for hours. Nothing came back. At least, nothing official. Because for the next 5 nights, radios across the Pacific, and beyond, started picking up something strange. In the days after the disappearance, roughly 120 possible distress signals were reported across the Pacific. Decades later, researchers at the aviation group Tiger analyzed them and judged 57 to be credible. 57, from a plane that was supposedly on the ocean floor. The strangest report came from a living room in St. Petersburg, Florida. A 15-year-old named Betty Klenk, listening to her family's shortwave, filled notebook pages with what she heard. A woman identifying herself as Amelia Earhart, pleading for help, a man's voice in the background. Skeptics call it impossible. Her notebook still exists. Now the detail that splits this case in two. Her transmitter could not work underwater, and by most analyses it needed an engine running to keep the batteries alive. If even one post-loss signal was real, the plane wasn't floating. It was on land, on its wheels, with an engine turning. Pan American Airways aimed its direction-finding stations at the signals, from Wake Island, Midway, and Honolulu. According to Tiger's reconstruction, several bearings crossed in one region, the Phoenix Islands, about 350 nautical miles southeast of Howland, right on her 157-337 line. To be clear, the U.S. Navy at the time dismissed the signals as hoaxes and misheard stations, and many researchers still agree. But those crossing bearings pointed at one uninhabited atoll in particular. Remember its name, Gardner Island. Today it's called Nikumaroro. What followed was the largest, most expensive search in American history to that point. Warships, aircraft carriers, some 250,000 square miles of ocean, a bill of around $4 million Depression-era dollars. And buried in that search is a moment that still haunts researchers. July 9, 1937, 1 week in. 3 Navy float planes from the battleship Colorado flew low over Gardner Island. The pilots reported signs of recent habitation on an island that was supposed to be empty, but believing castaways would have waved from the beach, they flew on. No one landed. On July 18th, the search was called off. In January 1939, Amelia Earhart was declared legally dead, but this island wasn't finished giving up secrets. 3 years later, someone found bones. 1940, a British colonial officer on now-settled Gardner Island discovers a partial human skeleton, 13 bones, beside a campfire site, a box built for a sextant, and part of a woman's shoe. A doctor in Fiji measures the bones in 1941 and rules them male. Case closed. Then the bones are lost, forever, except the measurements survived. In 2018, forensic anthropologist Richard Jantz reran them with modern methods, and concluded the bones were more similar to Amelia Earhart than 99% of people in his reference sample. Other scientists dispute it. The bones themselves can never settle it. Add the other Nikumaroro fragments, pieces of a 1930s jar consistent with an American freckle cream, a blurry 1937 photo of the reef, taken just 3 months after the disappearance, showing an object some analysts say resembles a landing gear. Every piece, suggestive, none conclusive. But before we get to the plane hunts, we owe you the dark theories. Because for decades, the loudest one wasn't an island at all. It was a prison cell. The theory: Earhart drifted into Japanese-held waters, was captured, and died a prisoner. In 2017, a History Channel documentary aired a photo claimed to show her alive on a dock in the Marshall Islands. It made global headlines. It took a blogger in Tokyo about half an hour to destroy it. He found the exact photograph in a Japanese travel book, published in 1935, 2 years before the flight. Whoever is on that dock, it cannot be Amelia Earhart. No verified document has ever placed her in Japanese custody. A wilder cousin of that theory claims she survived, came home under a new name, and lived quietly as a New Jersey banker named Irene Bolam. Bolam's response was a lawsuit, and the 1970 book making the claim was pulled from shelves, which leaves the explanation the U.S. government settled on in 1937, and most historians still favor: crash and sink. She never found Howland, the tanks ran dry, and the Electra went into deep water somewhere near the island. Simple, brutal, and, if true, findable, which is exactly what one team thought they'd done in January 2024. Deep Sea Vision, a South Carolina exploration company led by former Air Force intelligence officer Tony Romeo, had spent late 2023 scanning over 5,200 square miles of seabed with an underwater drone. In one sonar pass about 100 miles from Howland Island, a shape. The sonar image showed a plane-shaped object, twin tail, right size, resting 16,000 feet down on a seafloor that was otherwise flat and empty. It went viral worldwide. Headlines said it: Earhart's plane, believed found. It took 11 months to get back out there. On November 1st, 2024, the team flew their drone directly over the target for a high-resolution pass. And the plane was a rock formation. Nature had carved an aircraft out of stone, 3 miles underwater. Romeo called it the cruelest formation nature ever created. His crew even printed t-shirts. "We find rocks." Then they kept searching. Because here's the thing about this case. Every dead end just redirects the obsession. And right now, all of it is converging on one object, in one lagoon. 2020. A U.S. Navy veteran named Mike Ashmore is at home in California, scrolling satellite maps of, where else? Nikumaroro. In the lagoon, just off a peninsula called Taraya, he spots something long and pale under the water. It looks, to him, like an aircraft wing. Researchers trace the Taraya object backward through the archives. It becomes clearly visible in imagery from April 27, 2015, right after Cyclone Pam scoured the island and stripped away sediment. And archaeologist Richard Pettigrew says something matching its position appears in aerial photos as far back as 1938, 1 year after the Electra vanished. Not everyone buys it. Rick Gillespie, the man who spent 35 years building the Nikumaroro theory, believes the plane was swept off the reef around July 7, 1937, and torn apart in the surf. In his words, the airplane is gone. Some skeptics say the object is probably a fallen coconut palm. There's exactly one way to find out. Go there. An expedition led by the Archaeological Legacy Institute and Purdue, the university that funded her plane and hopes to finally bring it home, was set to sail last November. Kiribati permits and cyclone season killed it 2 weeks before departure. The new date? July 28, 2026. That's 26 days from now. The plan? Sail roughly 1,200 nautical miles from Majuro, 6 days at sea, then 5 days on Nikumaroro. 14 researchers. Cameras first, then sonar and magnetometers, and only then a hydraulic dredge to see what's actually lying under that lagoon sand. If it's aluminum, riveted twin-engine 1930s aluminum, this becomes one of the biggest archaeological finds of the century, and a full excavation follows in 2027. If it's a tree trunk, the Taraya object joins the sonar rock in the Museum of Almost. So where does the evidence actually point? Most historians and the official record still say crash and sink, fuel exhausted, ocean, deep water near Howland. It's the simplest reading of that final desperate morning on the radio. But the Nikumaroro case refuses to die, because it's the only theory that explains the radio physics. 57 credible signals need dry batteries and a turning engine, bearings that cross at the Phoenix Islands, bones that measure like her. A plane that was, perhaps, exactly where it said it was, on the line, 157-337. Here's what we owe you at the end of every file: the truth. No verified piece of that aircraft has ever been recovered. The bones are lost. Every discovery so far has dissolved under a second look. As of tonight, we still don't know. 89 years ago today, a woman at 1,000 feet told an ocean she was running north and south, looking for a way home. 26 days from now, a ship sails to a lagoon that might hold her answer. Or just another beautiful, cruel shape in the water. If that ship finds aluminum, you'll hear it here first. This file stays open. What do you think is under that lagoon? A plane? A palm tree? Or something no one's guessed? Tell us below. The Vanished Files, a new case every week. Subscribe so the next file finds you.